Hello and welcome everyone to our next episode where we introduce one of our ambassadors. Today I'm meeting with Mark Summers, who's based out of a town near Stuttgart in Germany. So we're in the same time zone, which is a good thing. And Mark, first and foremost, welcome to this conversation.
Sohrab, it's great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Now, similar to the other conversations that we ran, this is all about getting to know the ambassador, in this case, Mark. And Mark, I'll start with the same question that I always ask. Where did your Agile journey start?
So, I'm from a software development background. I think I was the kind of technical team lead. And I remember at the time we were working in a product development environment and our projects had started to get a little bit more, complex, I guess. What we noticed was that they kind of go green, 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 green. And then just as we were about to deliver, everything would kind of blow up. We're, try to get it integrated and all of this kind of stuff. So we were kind of globally distributed by that point. And so we realized something had to change. So we thought, do we kind of double down? Prince 2 was the thing that we were trying in those days. And we thought agile approaches and specifically Scrum would fit our culture better. So it was really since that point that I've been working, starting as a Scrum Master and then kind of later on as an Agile Coach. So that's kind of how it started.
So I think what you were just describing, it was all green until it wasn't. I refer to these projects as watermelon projects, green on the outside, red on the inside. Now, if we go back in that time again, what were some of the main reasons from now you looking back that resulted in the projects being like this?
I think it was the focus on delivering as much as you possibly could. So we were product development, we shipped every 6 months at that time. So we kind of have 4 months of delivery and, it'd be just like, how much can we build? How much can we put in? And then, of course, the testing phase always kind of got pushed at the end while we kind of had to get it to work on an integrated environment. For the product managers, sometimes that was the first time they'd seen what was coming back. So there was a lot of surprises and it didn't really meet the customer needs. So that's obviously a big one, but also the amount of defects that we were kind of introducing in that build. And then kind of long nights. And then at the end of that 6 months, it often kind of get the schedule get pushed. We'd overrun until eventually management kind of gave up and would go around with a piece of paper and all the managers would have to sign off in blood that we could release with all the known issues. But it felt very unsatisfactory. Yeah. So mainly from the quality perspective and not really always hitting the nail on the head with what customers needed.
And that's the thing, right? So it's two types of quality. It's the technical quality, but it's also the quality of the solution in general. Like, does it fit what the customers actually need? And you mentioned earlier that when you got into the testing environment, it was in many cases the first time that the product manager saw things. So the feedback loop was quite long. All of those things that we see basically in almost every company that is not taking in some kind of inspect and adapt or incremental iterative approach. Now, the other aspect based on your initial phrasing of your journey, you moved from a technical person to the role of that Scrum Master. How was that journey like? Because that's a fundamentally different job.
Absolutely. So I remember, putting on the Scrum Master hat. I think I was of the mindset that, let's try. I will be, 50% team member, 50% Scrum Master. Let's see how that goes. And then I remember at the end of the first sprint, I think I conducted my first retrospective and, I'd literally got 50, 100 sticky notes all over the wall. And the team, they honed in on something down here. And I was like, and that's what they're going to work on. But there was still like the 50, 75 other ones. Who's going to work on that stuff? So that's when I realized, a lot of that's stuff that's not even team stuff anyway. That's stuff that I can take up as the Scrum Master, as that kind of organizational change agent. So that was when the penny dropped for me that there's all these opportunities for improvement, and that's what I can do that kind of going to benefit the team, but also, I guess, other teams in the organization as well.
Yeah. So did you then move from 50-50, split in your roles, to being a full-time Scrum Master?
Very, very much full-time after that kind of realization. Also, I think I realized that I liked solving technical challenges. I used to be the developer who liked to go down to support and fix the things. So I could have a quick feedback loop with the customer that I was kind of improving people's lives and solving problems for people. But I think I got even more buzz out of helping people get better. realizing, by a Scrum Master, how I could help other people improve, just including growing their skills, including, thinking for themselves and solving problems for themselves. And that was really exciting for me.
Now, it's really interesting how you connect those two things, right? You basically being a problem solver, either from a technical perspective or now from a human dynamics, group dynamics perspectives, and like organizational dynamic, maybe even perspective. In your initial project where you moved into that role of a Scrum Master, what were the things within the organization that allowed you to do that? And by the things in the organization, I mean, for example, who became the sponsor of trying this new thing? Who allowed you to move from the role of a developer, where organizations immediately know, okay, he's writing lines of code, and that's how they track your productivity, move into a new role where they initially have no idea how to assess that person's productivity, right? Is that person worth the amount of money that we're spending on them? What were the dynamics back then?
I think what was important was relationships that I already had in the organization, and the respect and trust that went both ways with a number of different people. And I guess there was hierarchy. So within that hierarchy, there could have been people who put blockers on how I did my job and didn't, but we were acknowledging we were trying something different. My project manager, who was reported to directly, was like, well, you decide how you do your job. Your responsibility is the tech team leader. If by playing this role of Scrum Master, you think you're going to get the best out of the team, then go for it, and that kind of stuff. But I think as well, there was other actors, the director of the department, actually senior people were quite involved, or at least very aware of what we were doing. And, in the end, very supportive for us kind of running it as an experiment. And so, yeah. And I think that allowed me to do another important aspect of the Scrum Master, which is not always either understood or at least kind of carried out, is that, that kind of organizational change agent, having those conversations, being that catalyst for the change, which is really what the Scrum Master is all about. Unfortunately, we don't always see that these days in organizations.
Now, that's exactly the point that I wanted to get into. So nice segue in that case. For most people, and I fully agree with you, the role of the Scrum Master is limited to working with the team that is building the product. And even within that context, sometimes just limited to being the facilitator of the Scrum events. And obviously, both you and I know that's not the only intention that we have with the Scrum Master role. And one of my clients, they even went so far and they renamed the Scrum Master to Team Facilitator, which gave justice to how they interpreted that role, but obviously was not what we wanted a Scrum Master to be. So I see very few cases where on their very first assignment as Scrum Masters, people get to work on the organizational change and being that change agent or catalyst. How did that evolve in your case?
I think we were in a different time back then. So, this was 2006. I wasn't working in a large organization. I was working in a product development company. It was a bigger company, but my organization, as I saw it, was about 300 people working on a couple of products. So yeah, it was a different time. I was already in a position to influence people within the organization. Okay, I was relatively young then still, but I'd been in that company for 7 years, so I'd had time to build up the relationships, and nobody really knew what a Scrum Master was, so I could make it what I needed it to be in order to kind of get the best out of what we were trying to do, the best out of the team, and actually really make a difference in the organization. The world has moved on. Larger organizations obviously are adopting agile approaches. We've crossed some kind of chasms probably over that period as well. So I think the perception has come that, it is just that team facilitator. So it's a perception problem as much as anything. But I think, obviously I would like to see more courage, courageousness from those of us who wear the mantle of Scrum Master to really challenge the organization. I think also they've been seen as implementers rather than catalysts for change. You go and facilitate the Scrum. It's all about delivery. It's not about change. It's about delivery. And that's maybe where the focus has gone. So, yeah, I guess it comes down to the way that people have been doing the role as well. And also a big part of what I do these days is support Scrum Masters. So in a way, the industry has failed for the kind of Scrum Masters to really help people understand what it is supposed to be. I mean, I do a lot of Scrum Master training as well, and I'm quite surprised that everybody is like, oh, I didn't realize that was what the Scrum Master was supposed to do. That's not how I see it in my organization, So I don't know all of the reasons, but it certainly is. There's a big perception. I guess, unfortunately, one of the other things that's happened, and again, maybe I'm partly to blame, maybe others are partly to blame, but it's almost become a hierarchy within organizations that we've recreated of kind of Scrum Masters, Agile Coaches, Agile Delivery Managers, release train engineers, and all of this kind of stuff. And as soon as you kind of create that, it kind of disempowers the Scrum Masters.
Yes.
I always used to like to think of myself as a Scrum Master. I didn't, but mentally, I lived outside of the hierarchy. Because if I was going to have to challenge a senior person in the organization, I need to be courageous, and I need to kind of be able to present the case to them. And of course, as I mentioned, first thing, those relationships really help to do that. So people lack the relationships and the courage.
Yeah. I mean, as a change agent, you need to be some kind of, in chemical terms, like a free radical that can go and connect with everybody that's needed to drive something forward. And due to the hierarchies that you just presented, and I fully agree with you, that is not the case anymore. And most people limit themselves and are limited to the work within the team. Now, one thing you mentioned at the very beginning and then re-emphasized at the end is the relationships. And I earlier asked you about how it was for you from moving from a technical role into the Scrum Master role. But if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you were also in some kind of a leadership role already. You were the tech lead. So it was not like you're the guy that comes fresh out of university. Nobody knows what the role of the Scrum Master is, so they just give it to you as the most junior person on the team. You had been in the organization for 7 years. You had built relationships. You had been in a leadership position. And now you are appointed to be the Scrum Master. And I was wondering what role it played in you being, and I hope you consider your first engagement as a Scrum Master as a successful engagement, being successful based on having been in that leadership position prior, both in terms of your own confidence, your own abilities, but also how other people looked at you.
Yeah, I think it was definitely important, and I'd echo what you said. It's not probably, you're not going to be that change agent if you are just straight out of university. And I think what happened as I moved and transcended into being a Scrum Master is it just kind of helped me build what was already kind of happening in terms of both those relationships, and because of the conversations I was having to have, but also kind of the influence and things. So the other thing that it did with the team, for example, is it allowed me to build trust with the team. I literally overheard a conversation with, this Scrum thing, do you think it's a good idea? And somebody else in the team turned around and said, oh, well, Mark thinks it's a good idea and he's one of us, so let's trust in Mark. So it allowed me, the team saw me as one of those in a way. Of course, you've got to be careful because technical expertise can get in the way as much as kind of be a helper when you're in the role of Scrum Master. So that's with a word of warning. And there are other ways to build trust. But yeah, I guess it became less about my technical expertise that people started to value, and my kind of insights, I guess, into how we can kind of improve in the organization as well. I mean, I remember one thing that we were doing, it was a team that was mostly based in India, and our product owner was working across 3 or 4 teams. So he was quite a busy person. And we got to the end of one of the sprints and he hadn't seen anything the team had seen. And we used to allocate 2 hours for our sprint reviews. And I remember sitting in there because I was helping kind of facilitate across the kind of time zones and stuff like that. Even though I wasn't really the Scrum Master, I kind of used to go out and help these other teams when we kind of were in different time zones. And I was like, look, we're over an hour in. We've got through one of the 20 odd stories that they kind of delivered or whatever. But the product owner was going through in such minute detail. Yeah, okay, we've got 20 minutes left. I'm going to end this in 2 hours. Now, this product manager was well more respected than I was. And so I said, look, we're going to end in 5 minutes. And I ended the sprint review. He was absolutely furious with me, what I'd done. But, 4 weeks later, when we did it in 90 minutes and didn't overrun by, because it's the courage. And actually, he respected me for that. So I think it helps you build up that kind of reputation of, look, improving things by doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the focus on doing things is really important. Now, this was your first role. That's where your journey started. Obviously, it was not the end of your journey. Where did it take you from there?
Yeah, so after a couple of years of kind of scrum mastering in that organization, I was living in Sheffield in the UK at that point, and then my wife wanted to move me down to London, and I was looking for jobs as a scrum master, but I was kind of looking for companies that I wanted to work with. It's always a good strategy to choose the company first. And I spotted this consultancy called Conchango, and they were kind of early adopters of kind of agile ways of working. And by this point, they were bringing Ken Schwaber and Mike Cohen over and running the certified Scrum training in the UK. And they got this job advertised as an Agile Coach. Now, I didn't really know what an Agile Coach was back then, so this was like 2007. And yeah, I got hired and got to work with some awesome trainers and coaches out there. So we were kind of a team. I was working with Colin Bird, Simon Bennett, Matt Roadnight, Carl Scotland, Ed Scotcher and Margaret Morgan. And we just had a good time learning from each other and kind of going out and having an impact on the world. So that was when I first started kind of thinking of myself, I guess, as an Agile Coach.
And where did it take you from there? Ultimately, how did you become the Mark that is now working at Bilimina?
All right, okay, I'll give you the kind of highlights. So Scrum Alliance has always been my community previously, historically, and I became a certified Scrum Coach back in 2010 when it was still called that. And that was really my thing, working as a consultant, as a coach. Interestingly, I think one highlight there is I became a consultant before I became a professional coach. I was learning skills like facilitation and things like that, but I think it always stood me in good stead that I was kind of, learn how to be a trusted advisor, present the message, be a good communicator, build up relationships, before I started to learn some of the other agile coaching skills. Then I think it was 2013, I became a certified Scrum Trainer. My main motivation there was that I would get better consulting work if I kind of became a trainer. I've probably done more training than even I have done consulting work. Even though I try and keep a balance, I try and think of myself as like I spend a third of my time kind of training. I try to spend a third of my time working as a consultant and coach, and then a third of my time kind of improving myself or kind of contributing to the industry or community efforts and things like that. That would be nice. That would be the ideal. I think the big thing that I worked on so in 2014, I went to an Agile coaching retreat in Phoenix, and I brought the format back and that was 2013. 2014, I brought the format back to Europe, and we did our first Agile coaching retreat in London. So I've been a European advisor for those kind of events since. That's a great event, working as part of a team on something that you're passionate about. That's good stuff. Trying to produce something of value either to yourself or to the world. And it was one of those we first started looking at the challenge, actually over a number of different retreats. It was kind of a running theme with the problems out there in the world with the state of Agile coaching. So I think for a while, my focus has been on how do we professionalize the world of Agile coaching. So answering questions like, what is Agile coaching? We did that topic in Copenhagen, I think in 2017. 2016 in Geneva, we were looking at, how do we help middle managers who've got to change how they operate in a world where, it's not command and control anymore, directing people. It's about, building the Agile coaching skills that they need to be the facilitators, the coach, the support agents, the change agents. For this new way of working. But in 2018, we were looking at the issue of how do I grow as a coach? Because as a Scrum Master, as an Agile Coach, as a delivery manager, acting like a Scrum Master, whatever you happen to call yourself, it is very different, as you've alluded to, than being a team member. And you're one of a kind, maybe. There may be others, but it's more lonely maybe than being a team member. So how am I doing? Might be one question that you've got. How do I get better? So from that, we started working on the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel, for which I've been the product owner since. And then we've built on other things as well. I contributed to Bob Galen's book, the Badass Agile Coaching books. I wrote 3 chapters in there. And working with Bob, we created with comparative agility. We created a personal improvement tool to help people reflect as well. So that's the big kind of community effort that I've kind of been involved in, probably from around about 2018 up until quite recently.
And I think that's also how you and I got to meet at one of these agile coaching camps in Rückersbach, near
Yes,
Frankfurt.
Ruckersbach. Yeah, yes.
That must have been 2014, maybe 2015.
It was 2015, that one, yeah.
2015, probably one of the first ones. And I remember you were I mean, back you're still young, but back then you were even younger than you are today. I was like, who's this guy, right? He's organizing this kind of stuff and has a lot of experience. And it really hit me that age in that case doesn't really matter. But I was amazed by the level of experience, but also the professionalism that you brought to the table, and how much effort and energy you were putting into the community work, which is, I think, in general, quite strong if we look at the Agile community at large. But obviously, not everyone contributes to the same extent as you do. Now, at Biliminal, what is it that you guys do? What is it that you specifically do? You mentioned the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 split. But even with those 1/3 splits, looking at the work that you do as a trainer, the work that you do as a coach, it can be done on various levels within the organization, right? Either you can work with Scrum Masters and or primarily focus on leadership. You can improve teams or focus on the whole system. What is your passion? What drives you most?
Well, I think we have a shared thing at Biliminal, and it relates to people, and it's about, we've got like 100-year vision, obviously, which is about, really unleashing the human potential. It's about creating an environment where people can be the best that they can be. The thing that I do that links into that is, so with my focus of being a Scrum Master in the past, and I've done that many times, but also being an Agile coach, obviously that is the change agent aspect. So often when I go in and do my consulting, that's where I focus my efforts about building those internal capability. For me, it's all about sustainability. When you bring Biliminal or anybody in, you don't want them around forever. You want them to focus on building capability, and that's what I really focus on. Primarily, I guess, the change agent capability, so Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, if that's appropriate, but also kind of other roles as well. So building capability is probably my big thing. What I see as happened, there have been, I think, a few wrong turns and a few failures with maybe how the industry has supported organizations in moving to agility. And I think that's where we want to focus as Biliminal now. And I think that a lot of Agile coaches as well, I think they focus very much, I'm an Agile coach, I help and support teams. Yeah, well, you can get teams working effectively, in 3 to 6 months and they're kind of banging out stuff, but are they delivering the right value? Yeah. Also, in a large organization, they're just probably part of a bigger system. So I think not enough of us have kind of taken that kind of systemic view across organizations. And I think that's definitely where we are helping people as Biliminal. So, people talk about different things. I know, Sohrab, you've talked about, business agility, and you've focused on that kind of area as well. And the language we are currently using is enterprise agility, just because we like the term enterprise, but you probably could have kind of swapped the words, just because enterprise is kind of, it's not necessarily limited to one organization. We, as two organizations, we're an enterprise together to achieve this thing. So kind of it's kind of even more holistic in terms of a concept. But our approach is very much, it's not about implementing frameworks. It's not about doing it this way. It's about working with people to understand what are your challenges in the organization. And then what are the right patterns out there? Because many people have had lots of successes, but it's about picking the individual patterns that will help address your tensions or your challenges in the organizations, that provide the real opportunity for improvement, and then working with people to design approaches that will work for those. I also think one of the other things that we are really, really focused on is the way that we do change. So many change initiatives that I've kind of gone into and, maybe come in partway through or something like that. And what you've got is middle management have been told by senior leadership, we've got to go agile now. And then they're kind of locked in a room, designing a new operating model. Everybody's really nervous about, is my job going to be safe? And then, after a few months, here's the new operating model. You're now all in Scrum teams or, but no training, no support, and actually nothing changes. Obviously, I'm painting an ultra end of the picture, but actually many organizations has been exactly that. So I don't think I'm being too harsh. But change, I think the problem with change is, people say, people resist change. Well, change is a constant, and as humans, we are quite adaptable. And it's not change itself people are resisting, it's being changed. So, get out of the office creating these operating models, go understand what the challenges are, work with people. So don't do change to people, it's do change with people. So, and really helping them design the experiments that are going to have an impact on their lives. And it's not always about, doing Scrum or whatever, it could be about working with leadership to help them identify what their strategy is, or it could be around hiring policies, going to work with HR, learning and development, so it's go find the challenges and then help organizations, meet organizations where they are and make them small enough so that they don't get spat out by those organizational antibodies as well. So, really kind of what's the smallest experiment that we can prove we can have some value in that area, and then you can make it bigger. So that's what we focus on.
You mentioned a ton of relevant things. Now, the topic of change is one that is particularly interesting to me because similar to what you described, I've seen that in many organizations, how they approach it and ultimately how it doesn't work or how it makes it very difficult for people to become also part of that change instead of just being changed, which they would most likely rightfully also resist. We talked earlier about relationships, and relationships for me are ultimately trust, right? So as an external, what is it that you do to develop those relationships, to create that trust, so that the people that you're working with are also willing to run those experiments? Because it's one thing to say we have to start with the smallest experiment possible or with the smallest change possible, and then see what kind of success it brings, and through that build momentum. And obviously that creates more trust, etc. But that initial spark, right? How do you create that with your customers, with your clients?
I mean, obviously the answer is, firstly, it depends on the person.
Yes.
But I think one common thing with most relationships would be about understanding what people want. And, you're coming into the system and also then on the flip side of that, what are their goals, desires, dreams, how could, to find out how you can help them, and also set expectations about what do they expect of me as a change agent, so, and how are we going to measure success? That they are important to kind of things down. So what I'm really talking about is those kind of contracting conversations, unearthing, their needs, understanding what success looks like to them, and how we're going to know if we're moving towards that. And then everything that you do is like a little test. Test-driven agile coaching. I kind of started thinking about that about 2010. Is like everything you're doing is a little experiment. You know where you're trying to get to, and you built contracts around that with your hiring manager, your teams, your product owner, the leadership team, whoever you happen to be working with. And then it's, well, here are the challenge. Let's work with people. Let's design an experiment. And then the other important thing, I think, is feedback. Of course, it's basically agile stuff, isn't it? It's like, do change in an agile way. So yeah, have a feedback loop. So loops that allow you to meet with all of those stakeholders and review the experiments in progress. Are they taking us in the right direction? And that's what builds up the relationships and the trust. It's not, yeah, okay, I do some training and stuff like that, and can kind of wax lyrical about certain agile things. But I'm really, in an organization, you are only going to really build respect when you see that positive change starting to happen. So, and again, that's why it's important to make it small so that we can get traction, and then the feedback loops are very important. And that all feed back into the relationships. So making a difference.
No, it's so interesting, right? It's ultimately the same principles that help us build good products. And I like the term that you brought up, test-driven agile coaching. We could also say test-driven organizational design or development, right? TDOD or whatever, TDAC. Now, Mark, in order to close this conversation and stay more or less within our time box, then my last question to you, what kinds of organizations should seek out working with you, working with Biliminal? What would be the prerequisites that allow you and your organization have the biggest impact?
I think most importantly is it has to be an organization that really, I think to get the most out of it is, we can help anybody, of course, but to get the most out of it is an openness to experiment and change things. That can be at different levels of scale. The ultimate scale, it works best when we come in, we get to work with the leadership team, we create the positive momentum by understanding what their tensions are. Then we go into kind of work with the groups that have been emerged from that. So it's just a willingness to try things, I think. I think there's lots of organizations that realize that they face challenges. So as long as you can realize that you've got some challenges and you've got an interest in exploring about how we could experiment and maybe do some things in a different way, that's the green grass, and we can certainly work with you and help you.
And I think building on top of that, if the people that become the sponsors of the change are willing to role model changing themselves, they also create that kind of a momentum or movement within the organization where more and more people are willing to try some of those experiments. So, Mark, it was really great talking to you, catching up after quite some time. Learned a lot in that conversation, and hopefully the people that listen to this learn even more and then become curious about working with you and working with Biliminal as your organization. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sohrab.